Hi, I'm Jane Coles, presenting on behalf of myself and my co-PIs, Forrest, Isabel, and Laura D., on our working group entitled Scaling Up Productivity Responses to Changes in Biodiversity. We know that people both influence and depend on biodiversity. By that I mean people influence or impact biodiversity by doing things like converting natural habitats to croplands or changing the climate. People also depend on biodiversity and the ecosystem services it provides, such as timber production, forage for livestock, and fish from the oceans. However, we do not know yet the extent to which our impacts on global biodiversity will impact the provisioning of ecosystem services. This is because there is a fundamental mismatch in the scales at which we ask and answer these questions. Here in this graph, we have spatial scale along the x-axis, so whether you're considering the local, landscape, or global scale, and temporal scale on the y-axis, so going from years to decades up to centuries. So we know that anthropogenic drivers are impacting biodiversity at global scales and over centuries, leading to the sixth mass extinction that is happening right now. On the other hand, our knowledge regarding the impact of biodiversity on ecosystem functioning is drawn largely from theory and local scale, shorter term experiments. And the scale at which ecosystem functioning is converted to valued ecosystem services is about in between the two. Furthermore, policy is largely conducted and considered at this medium to large scale. And a lot of the issues of bringing the importance of biodiversity ecosystem functioning into policy stems from this mismatch. How can we take a highly controlled plot on the scale of meters and extend that to national or global policy? As such, the central question or goal of our working group is basically to expand these orbs of knowledge and expand our abilities to credibly draw conclusions on the way in which people's dependence on and influence over biodiversity may affect the sustainability of the Earth. To do this, we are leveraging theory and data sets such as the LTER network and other broad-scale and distributed data sets to estimate the presence and strength of the impacts of biodiversity on ecosystem functioning and services, in particular at scales relevant to policy and management. We brought together a team of experts on biodiversity theory, experiments, observational data, and statistical techniques in order to tackle these issues. So a quick summary of two of our findings and products. So the first, a 2018 paper led by Forrest Isabel, is a new statistical partitioning of how biodiversity impacts productivity. And that allows us to estimate the impacts of spatial and temporal insurance effects on productivity. Or in other words, ways in which biodiversity effects can emerge over space and time. Secondly, we are looking at how rare species or common species are changing differently over space and time. So are rare species being preferentially lost? And how are these trends maybe vary by human drivers or even type of data set? Lastly, and importantly, we want to know under which of these contexts there will be consequences greater or smaller than average for ecosystem functioning and services. We included in this analysis a bunch of global data sets, which include a lot of LTER sites. The PREDICTS data is a spatial data set of biodiversity across the globe, including different human land use factors. BioTime is a set of time series data sets across the globe. And of course, the globally distributed nutrient network experiment, which occurs in a lot of the LTER sites. And this analysis is being led by Tim Newbold. So some findings from this paper, which is still in prep. Here we have two different graphs in which commonness is on the x-axis of both. So towards the left of each graph is rare species, and towards the right are the most common species. And the three lines in both graphs are different land use categories, so pasture, cropland, or plantations, and it compares to unaltered land. So in the left, we can see that under these three human land use scenarios, the probability of a rare species disappearing is greater than that of a common species, because the probability of occurrence, which is the y-axis, goes down for the rare species. Further, we see that in those species that survive or that persist, so the graph on the right, we see that the more common species actually decrease in abundance, while the rare species that do persist tend to become more common. So some further directions and other projects we're working on. Laura D is spearheading a project examining how we can use tools from other disciplines to credibly estimate causal relationships in observational data sets. I'm leading a project examining how mechanisms of coexistence change under global changes and across space and time. And finally, we're trying to figure out and outline what research we can begin or start today in order to not have these data mismatches in 50 years. So how can we propel the field forward? Thank you for your time.